Sors d'ici, pauvre.
Billionaire woman mocks humble man in another language. Get out, you poor man. His reply stuns her. The morning sun cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Elite Brew, casting geometric shadows across marble floors that cost more per square foot than most people earned in a month. Sienna watched the light play across her pink blazer, the fabric shimmering with each breath. Her Dodge Challenger sat outside, its custom rose gold paint job drawing stares from passers-by who pressed their faces against the glass like children at a candy store. She checked her Patek Philippe, 8:47 a.m. 3 minutes until her conference call with Tokyo investors. The coffee shop hummed with the particular energy of wealth, hushed conversations about mergers, quiet laughter from women whose faces showed no emotion thanks to careful injections, the soft clink of platinum credit cards against Italian marble countertops. Sienna adjusted her beach shorts, an intentional contradiction to the corporate blazer. Let them stare, let them wonder. At 24, she'd built Castellane Industries from a single tech patent into a $2 billion empire. She wore whatever the hell she wanted. Miss Castellane, your usual? The barista's voice carried the practiced deference reserved for those who tipped in hundreds. Double espresso, extra hot. The door chimed. Sienna didn't look up from her phone, scrolling through pre-market numbers. Castellane stock was up 4 points. Good. The board meeting next week would be coffee, black, large. The voice made her glance up. A man stood at the counter, maybe 28, wearing faded jeans and a Henley that had seen better days. His brown hair needed cutting, and his work boots tracked something onto the pristine floor that made the barista's eye twitch. But it was his posture that caught her attention. Military straight. Too controlled, like he was always ready for something. That'll be $8.50, the barista said, her tone noticeably cooler than it had been moments before. The man reached for his wallet, and Sienna saw it, the hesitation. Just a fraction of a second, but she'd built her fortune reading people's tells across negotiation tables. She knew what that pause meant. He didn't belong here, couldn't afford to be here. The French came naturally. Years of boarding school in Switzerland had made it her second language, perfect for conversations she didn't want overheard. Sors d'ici, pauvre. Tu ne peux même pas te permettre le café ici. Get out, poor man. You can't even afford the coffee here. She said it quietly, meant only for her own amusement, a private observation about the absurdity of someone so clearly out of place, trying to blend into her world. The man's hand stilled on his wallet. For a moment, everything in the coffee shop seemed to pause. The hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversation, even the traffic outside seemed to quiet. Then he turned to her, and his eyes were the color of a winter storm. Je peux me le permettre, he said, his French flawless accent perfect. La question est, peux-tu te permettre d'être aussi grossière? I can afford it. The question is, can you afford to be this rude? Heat flooded Sienna's face. Around them, the few people who understood French had gone silent, watching. The barista's mouth hung open. He pulled out a worn leather wallet, extracted a $50 bill, and placed it on the counter with deliberate care. Keep the change, he said in English now, his voice carrying that same controlled calm. Buy yourself some manners with it. He took his coffee and walked to a corner table, his back to the room, dismissing her as completely as if she'd ceased to exist. Sienna stood frozen, her phone forgotten in her hand. No one spoke to her like that. No one. She was Sienna Castellane. She'd negotiated with Fortune 500 CEOs, stared down hostile takeovers, fired executives twice her age without blinking. And this nobody in work boots, had just put her in her place with a dozen words. Her phone buzzed. Tokyo. The conference call. She forced herself to move, walking to a private booth with as much dignity as she could gather, but her hands shook as she answered the call. For the next 45 minutes, she discussed yen valuations and market penetration, but part of her brain remained fixed on the man in the corner. Who was he? Where had he learned French like that? And why did his eyes look like he'd seen things that would make her worst boardroom battles seem like playground disputes? When the call ended, she looked toward his table. He was gone. Only his empty cup remained, and tucked underneath it, a note written in precise handwriting on a coffee shop napkin. Les diamants ne se polissent pas sans friction. Peut-être en as-tu besoin. Diamonds aren't polished without friction. Maybe you need some. Sienna stared at the words until they blurred. Then she did something she hadn't done in 5 years of building her empire. She laughed. Not the practiced professional sound she used in meetings, A real laugh, startled and genuine, that earned her concerned looks from nearby tables. She tucked the napkin into her blazer pocket and left, her coffee untouched. 3 weeks later, the Challenger's engine made a sound like a dying whale. Sienna was on Pacific Coast Highway, the ocean spreading blue and infinite to her left, when the car shuddered and the check engine light blazed to life. She managed to coast into a parking lot before the whole thing gave up, steam rising from under the hood in theatrical clouds. No, no, no. She slammed her palm against the steering wheel. She had a meeting in Santa Monica in 40 minutes. A meeting that could expand her company into the autonomous vehicle sector. A meeting that represented 6 months of negotiations. Her phone showed 3 bars. She pulled up her contacts, scrolling past assistants and lawyers, and the private concierge service that handled everything from restaurant reservations to international shipping. Then she saw it. Marino's Auto Repair 24/7, 3 miles. 15 minutes later, a tow truck deposited her beloved Challenger in a garage that smelled of motor oil and honest work. The space was clean but worn, tools organized with military precision on pegboards, classic rock playing from a speaker that had seen better days. "Someone will be with you in a minute," the dispatcher said, eyeing Sienna's beach shorts and glittering heels like she was a particularly confusing puzzle. Sienna checked her phone. 32 minutes until the meeting. She could still make it if, well, fancy meeting you here. The voice stopped her heart. She turned slowly, knowing what she'd see but hoping she was wrong. He stood in the doorway to the garage bay, wearing coveralls with Carter embroidered over the pocket, grease smudged across one cheekbone. His brown hair was pulled back, and those grey eyes held something that might have been amusement. "You," she said, the word coming out strangled. "Me." Carter wiped his hands on a rag, unhurried. "Car problems?" "The engine—" She stopped, regrouped. "Yes, obviously. Can you fix it? I have a meeting in 30 minutes. He walked past her to the Challenger, popped the hood and peered inside with the focus of a surgeon examining a patient. His hands moved over the engine with confident familiarity. "Coolant system's shot. Probably been leaking for weeks. You'd have noticed if you paid attention to anything besides yourself." The words hit like a slap. "Excuse me. Your temperature gauge." He pointed to the dashboard without looking at her. "It's been climbing. You ignored it. Now you're here instead of your meeting, wondering why the universe is so unfair." Sienna's jaw clenched. "How dare you? How dare I?" Now he did look at her, straightening to his full height. He was tall, she realized, at least 6'2". "Lady, you insulted me in a coffee shop for having the audacity to exist in your space. I think we're past worrying about dare. I apologized for that." "No, you didn't." She opened her mouth, closed it. He was right. She'd meant to, had composed the apology in her head a dozen times over the past 3 weeks, but she'd never actually said the words. "I'm sorry," she said now and meant it. Now, "What I said was cruel and classist and inexcusable. I was having a bad morning, which is no excuse, and I took it out on a stranger. You didn't deserve that." Carter studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once, sharp and military. "Accepted. Now about your car. I can patch the coolant system today, get you to your meeting, but you'll need a full replacement, which means ordering parts. 3 days, maybe 4. I need my car." "Then you shouldn't have ignored the warning signs." He turned back to the engine. "I can have it ready in 20 minutes. You'll make your meeting if you leave now and break a few traffic laws." "Thank you," she said, surprising herself with the sincerity. "Really, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You're still going to miss your meeting." "What? You just said—" "I did, but you're not going to leave." He looked at her again, and there was something in his expression that made her chest tight. "Because you're curious. You want to know how some mechanic speaks French like he studied at the Sorbonne. You want to know why I don't treat you like you're special. And most of all, you want to know why that napkin I left is still in your pocket." Sienna's hand flew to her blazer. The napkin was there, creased from 3 weeks of being carried around like a talisman. "How did you—" "You touched it. When you walked in. Unconscious gesture, checking it's still there." He smiled, and it transformed his face from handsome to devastating. "I'm observant, comes with the job. Mechanic? Navy SEAL, retired." Oh, that explained the posture, the precision, the eyes that had seen things she couldn't imagine. "Why retire?" The question came out before she could stop it. "You're what, 28? 28? And you're 24. Built a tech empire from scratch, and wear beach shorts to billion-dollar meetings because you can. We've both got our stories, Miss Castellane. How do you know my name?" "You're on the registration. Also, I've seen you on Forbes more than once. He leaned against her car, casual despite the grease stains. Why'd you really insult me that day? The question caught her off guard. I told you, bad morning. Try again. I don't... She stopped. Something about his steady gaze made lies impossible. You looked like you didn't belong, and I've spent my entire life fighting to belong in rooms that didn't want me. Woman, young, not from money. Every board meeting, every investor pitch, I have to prove I deserve to breathe their air. And then you walked in looking like you'd stumbled in by accident, and I just took out your frustration on an easy target. Yes, the admission hurt, which makes it worse, not better. It does, he agreed, but at least it's honest. He pushed off the car and walked to his toolbox, selecting a wrench with the same focus he'd shown examining the engine. Sienna watched his hands work, scarred and capable, a contrast to the soft, manicured fingers of the executives she dealt with daily. The French, she said. Where did you learn it? Angers. Spent 2 years stationed there with Joint Special Operations. Became fluent out of boredom and too much time in cafes. You were in Special Operations. For 8 years. Saw 30 countries, most of them through a rifle scope. Got out last year. Decided I wanted to do something where people don't shoot at me. So you fix cars? I fix cars. He glanced at her. Is that beneath you? No. The word came fast, defensive. That's not what I meant. But you're thinking it. Wondering how a guy with my skills ends up in a garage instead of private security or defense contracting. He was right. She was thinking exactly that. I chose this, Carter continued, returning his attention to her engine. After 8 years of violence and politics and watching good people die for complicated reasons, I wanted simple. You break, I fix. You pay, I eat. No moral ambiguity, no collateral damage. Sienna felt something crack in her chest. When was the last time anyone in her life had chosen simple? Your coolant's patched, he said. You've got about 3 hours before it needs a real fix. Enough to get to your meeting and back. The parts you mentioned, for the full repair. I'll order them today. Call you when they're in. She nodded, started toward her car, then stopped. Carter? Yeah? That note. The one about diamonds and friction. What about it? Did you mean it? Or were you just being clever? He wiped his hands on his rag again, taking his time before answering. My first team leader used to say the same thing. He was talking about combat, about how pressure creates warriors. But it works for people too. You've had success, Miss Castellane, easy success. Built an empire before you hit 25. But I'm betting you've never had anyone challenge you. Not really. Not in a way that made you better, instead of just angry. And you think you can challenge me? I know I can. He met her eyes unflinching. Question is whether you're brave enough to let me. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. I should go. My meeting. You should. But she didn't move, neither did he. I'll call you, she said finally. When the parts come in. I'm sure you will. She made it to her car, hand on the door handle before she turned back one more time. Carter, why were you really at that coffee shop that day? Elite Brew. It's not exactly convenient to anywhere. His smile was slow, almost sad. Same reason you're asking. Curiosity. Wanted to see how the other half lived. Turned out exactly like I expected. And how's that? Expensive coffee, cheap humanity. The words should have stung. Instead, they felt like relief, like someone finally telling her the truth instead of what she wanted to hear. Sienna drove to her meeting in a daze, made her pitch, closed the deal, and remembered none of it. Her mind was stuck in a garage that smelled of oil and honesty, on a man who'd seen through her in minutes, when her board of directors hadn't managed it in years. That night, alone in her penthouse overlooking the city, she pulled out the napkin. The French was elegant, the handwriting precise. Diamonds aren't polished without friction. She traced the words with one finger, then did something she hadn't done since building her company. She called her assistant and cleared her schedule for the next day. No meetings, no calls, just space, time to think, because Carter had been right about everything. The car, the curiosity, the fact that she'd carried his note for 3 weeks like it meant something, and maybe it did. Maybe it meant she was tired of being polished and perfect and alone at the top of her mountain of money. Maybe it meant she wanted friction, wanted someone who saw her as more than a walking investment portfolio. Maybe it meant she was ready to be challenged. 3 days later, her phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Castellane, it's Carter. Your parts are in. I'll be there in an hour. Sounds good. Fair warning, though. What? The repair's going to take most of the day. You'll be stuck here with me, talking. No corporate armor, no expensive coffee, just you and me and a busted coolant system. Sienna looked around her office, at the floor-to-ceiling windows and the abstract art that cost more than most houses and the emptiness of it all. "That's fine," she said. "I could use the friction." His laugh was surprised and genuine. "Well then, see you soon, Miss Castellane." "Sienna," she corrected. "If we're going to talk all day, you might as well use my name." "Sienna," he repeated, and the way he said it made it sound like a different word entirely, not a brand or a Forbes cover or a corporate entity, just a name, just a person. "See you soon, Carter." She hung up and stared at her reflection in the darkened window, 24 years old, $2 billion, and absolutely terrified of a mechanic who'd seen more of her in 2 conversations than most people saw in years. The smart thing would be to send her car to a different garage, to forget about those watchful eyes and perfect French, and the way he looked at her like she was a puzzle worth solving, instead of a portfolio worth managing. But Sienna hadn't built an empire by playing it safe. She grabbed her keys and headed for the elevator, beach shorts and her signature blazer and all. Time to see what friction felt like when you stopped running from it. The garage was quieter in the afternoon, most of the bays empty, the radio playing something old and bluesy that Sienna didn't recognize. Carter was under her Challenger when she arrived, only his legs visible, work light illuminating the undercarriage. "You're early," he called out, not emerging. "I left right after we hung up. Eager, efficient. Same thing." He rolled out on a creeper, grease-smudged and grinning. "Coffee? You have coffee here. Break room. It's terrible, but it's free, and it won't bankrupt you." The jab was gentle, but she felt it anyway. "I deserved that." "You did." He stood, stretching, and Sienna tried not to notice the way his coveralls pulled across his shoulders. "Come on, I'll show you where the magic happens." The break room was exactly what she expected. Fluorescent lights, ancient microwave, coffee maker that had seen better decades. Carter poured 2 cups of something that looked like motor oil and handed her one. "To low expectations," he said, raising his cup, "to exceeding them." She took a sip and immediately regretted it. "Oh my God, that's awful." "Told you." "Why do you drink this?" "Because it's here and it's free and it keeps me awake." Not everything needs to be optimized, Sienna. The use of her first name sent a small thrill through her. "My business would disagree. Your business isn't your life." "It is, actually. I built it from nothing. It's everything I am." Carter leaned against the counter, studying her with that unsettling focus. "That's sad." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. You're 24, brilliant, obviously, driven, successful beyond most people's dreams, and you've made yourself into a walking company instead of a human being. That's not impressive. It's sad." Anger flared, hot and familiar. "You don't know anything about me. I know you carried a napkin in your pocket for 3 weeks. I know you showed up an hour early because you were curious. I know you're standing in a garage drinking terrible coffee when you could be anywhere in the world doing anything you want. So, yeah, I know some things. That doesn't give you the right to judge my life." "You're right, it doesn't." He set down his coffee, his expression softening. "But somebody should. When's the last time anyone told you the truth instead of what you wanted to hear?" Never. The answer was never, and they both knew it. Sienna set down her own cup, suddenly exhausted. "Why do you care?" "Honestly, I'm not sure I do yet, but I'm curious. Same as you, wondering if there's an actual person under all that armor." "There is." "Prove it. Tell me something real, not a Forbes article fact or a corporate bio detail, something true." The challenge hung in the air between them. Sienna felt her walls rising, defensive and automatic. But something about the way Carter looked at her, not impressed, not intimidated, just genuinely curious, made her want to try. "I'm lonely," she said quietly. "All the time. Success didn't fix it. Money didn't fix it. Nothing fixes it." Carter nodded slowly. "That's honest, thank you. Your turn." "What?" "Something real. Fair's fair." He smiled, surprised. "All right. I'm angry every day. At the things I saw, the things I did, the people who didn't make it home. Fixing cars helps, but it doesn't fix that." They stood in the fluorescent-lit break room, 2 people who'd built armor for very different reasons, and for the first time in years, Sienna felt seen. "The car will take 6 hours, Carter said. Maybe 7. You really want to stay?" "Yeah." "Why?" "Because you're right. I am curious, and because nobody's talked to me like I'm human in longer than I can remember." "All right then." He gestured to the garage. "Come on, I'll teach you how to replace a coolant system. Get your hands dirty. Do something real for once." Sienna looked down at her outfit. "I'm not exactly dressed for manual labor." I've got coveralls. They'll swallow you whole, but they'll keep you clean. 10 minutes later, Sienna stood in the garage bay wearing coveralls 3 sizes too big, her hair pulled back, watching Carter explain the intricacies of her car's cooling system with the same focus he'd probably used to brief special operations missions. The radiator connects here, he said, pointing. Coolant flows through these hoses, gets cooled, circulates back. Simple system, but when it fails, it takes everything else with it. Like a corporate structure, Sienna said without thinking. Carter glanced at her, eyebrows raised. Exactly like that. One weak point, whole thing collapses. So, how do you prevent collapse? Regular maintenance, attention to detail, not ignoring warning signs. He handed her a wrench. Also helps to have someone who knows what they're doing check it regularly. Second pair of eyes. She took the tool, their fingers brushing. The contact was brief but electric. I don't usually let people check my work. I noticed. How's that going for you? Sienna laughed despite herself. You're relentless. I'm honest, there's a difference. They worked in companionable silence for a while, Carter explaining each step, Sienna surprising herself by actually enjoying the methodical process. There was something meditative about it, this simple act of fixing something broken. Can I ask you something? She said as he guided her hands to tighten a connection. Shoot. Why'd you really leave the Navy? You said you wanted simple, but I don't buy that. Men like you don't choose simple. His hands stilled on hers. Men like me? Warriors? Leaders? People who thrive on challenges. That's a generous assessment from someone who met me 3 weeks ago. I'm good at reading people. It's how I've survived this long. Carter stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag, his expression distant. I left because I was good at it. Too good. They wanted me to lead a team back to Afghanistan, train the next generation of operators, and I realized I was perpetuating a cycle I didn't believe in anymore. What cycle? Violence as solution, power as goal, the idea that strength means never showing weakness. He looked at her directly. Sound familiar? The words hit like a physical blow. He was talking about her, about the empire she'd built on being untouchable. That's different, is it? You just wage your wars in boardrooms instead of deserts, but it's still about dominance, still about never letting them see you bleed. I don't... She stopped. That's not fair. No, it's accurate. There's a difference. Sienna wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come, because he was right. Every negotiation, every board meeting, every investor pitch, she approached them like battles to be won, enemies to be dominated. When had that happened? When had success become synonymous with conquest? I don't know how to be any other way, she admitted quietly. Then learn. That's what friction does. Teaches you new shapes, by grinding away the old ones. Only the parts that don't work anymore. They finished the repair in a different kind of silence, thoughtful rather than comfortable. By the time the last bolt was tightened and the coolant system tested, evening had fallen, casting long shadows through the garage bay doors. You're done, Carter said, closing her hood. Should run smooth now. Thank you. For the car. And the conversation. They go together. He walked her to the driver's side door, hesitating before opening it. Can I ask you something now? Yes. That meeting you rushed to, the one you almost missed, did you close the deal? I did. Do you even remember what it was for? Sienna opened her mouth to answer and realized she didn't. Couldn't. The details had evaporated, meaningless in the face of the conversation they'd just had. No, she said. I don't. But you remember this, us, this conversation? Yes. Then maybe you should think about what that means. He opened her door, stepping back. Drive safe, Sienna. She got in, started the engine, it purred perfectly, and rolled down the window. Carter, when can I see you again? His smile was slow and genuine. Whenever you want. I'm not hard to find. Tomorrow, dinner. Let me take you somewhere nice. Why? Because I want to, because I'm curious, because you challenge me. All good reasons. But no. Her heart dropped. No? Not somewhere nice, somewhere real. A place where we're just two people, not a billionaire and a mechanic. No performance, no expectations. Where? I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something you don't mind getting dirty. Before she could respond, he stepped back into the garage, leaving her sitting in her Challenger with more questions than answers. Sienna drove home slowly, her mind racing. She should be insulted. He'd rejected her offer, dictated terms, treated her like an equal instead of the prize she'd always been in her limited dating experience. She should hate it. Instead, she couldn't stop smiling. That night she stood in her penthouse closet, staring at racks of designer clothes, and realized she didn't own anything that qualified as real. Everything was performance, armor, carefully curated image. She pulled out her phone and called her assistant. "I need you to cancel all my meetings tomorrow. Miss Castellane, all of them? All of them, personal day. Is everything all right?" Sienna looked at her reflection in the closet mirror, seeing herself clearly for maybe the first time in years. The armor, the performance, the carefully constructed version of success that had left her lonely and hollow. "No," she said honestly, "but it might be soon." She hung up and went to her laptop, pulling up the garage's website. There in the staff photos was Carter. The bio was sparse. Carter Marino, lead mechanic, Navy veteran, specializes in import and domestic repair. No social media, no digital footprint, just a man who'd walked away from violence and chose to fix things instead of break them. A man who saw through her in minutes and didn't flinch. A man who might just teach her what friction really meant. Sienna closed her laptop and sat in the darkness of her penthouse, the city lights sprawling below like a constellation of ambition and money. Somewhere down there, Carter was probably in a small apartment, reading or sleeping or doing whatever normal people did at night, not checking stock prices, not planning corporate strategies, just living. When was the last time she'd just lived? Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother in Monaco. "Darling, the Vandermeers are hosting a yacht party next month. You simply must attend. Prince Henrik will be there." Sienna deleted it without responding. Her mother had been trying to marry her off to European royalty since she'd made her first billion, as if money needed to marry money, breeding more money in an endless cycle of gilded emptiness. She stood and walked to her window, pressing her palm against the cool glass. 24 years old, everything she'd ever wanted, and completely, utterly alone. The napkin was still in her blazer pocket. She pulled it out, reading the French again. "Diamonds aren't polished without friction." What would it feel like to be polished? To let someone file away the sharp edges she'd cultivated so carefully? To be vulnerable instead of victorious? Terrifying, probably, but also, maybe necessary. Sienna went to bed but didn't sleep. Instead, she lay awake thinking about watchful eyes and honest words and the way Carter's hands had moved over her engine with the same focus most men reserved for her body. He'd barely looked at her like that, like she was attractive. He'd looked at her like she was interesting, like she was a problem worth solving. When had anyone last done that? Morning came too slowly and too fast. Sienna showered, dressed in the most casual clothes she owned, jeans she'd bought for a corporate retreat and never worn, a simple t-shirt, and stared at herself in the mirror. Without the blazer and the shorts and the armor of wealth, she looked young, uncertain, human, good, she thought. That's the point. Her phone rang at precisely 7 a.m. "Carter. Change of plans," he said without preamble. "Can you be ready in 30 minutes? I thought you said 7 p.m. "I did, but I'm thinking you need a full day of real, not just dinner. Unless you have meetings you can't cancel." Sienna thought of her cleared schedule, the shocked face of her assistant, the board members who would be scrambling to understand why their CEO had suddenly gone dark. "No meetings," she said. "Where are we going?" "You'll see. Wear closed-toe shoes and bring a jacket. It'll be cold where we're headed." He hung up before she could ask more questions. 30 minutes later, Sienna stood outside her building in jeans, a warm jacket, and sneakers she'd bought for a hiking event 2 years ago and never worn. A truck pulled up. Not Carter's tow truck, but an old Ford F-150, dark blue, well-maintained but clearly loved and used. Carter leaned out the window. "You actually wore normal clothes. I'm impressed." "Don't be. This is the most normal I own." "That's sad. You keep saying that, because it keeps being true." He gestured to the passenger seat. "You coming, or are we going to debate your wardrobe all morning?" Sienna climbed in. The truck smelled like coffee and something else, gun oil maybe, or the particular scent of someone who'd lived in dangerous places. The seat was worn but clean, the dashboard free of the high-tech displays her Challenger boasted. "Where are we going?" she asked as he pulled into traffic. "North, about 2 hours." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." He handed her a travel mug. "Coffee, real coffee, not that sludge from yesterday." She took a sip. It was good. Really good. "Where did you get this?" "Made it this morning. French press. Learned it in Angers. You made me coffee." "I made me coffee. You're just benefiting from my caffeine addiction." But he was smiling, and Sienna felt something warm bloom in her chest. They drove in comfortable silence, the city giving way to suburbs, then to hills covered in oak trees and chaparral. Sienna watched the landscape change, realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd left the city for anything other than business. "Tell me about the Navy," she said after an hour. What made you join? Carter's hands tightened on the wheel, then relaxed. My dad. He was Army Vietnam, died when I was 16. I wanted to understand what he'd been through, what had changed him. Did you? Yeah, and I wish I hadn't. He glanced at her. Some things are better not understood. You just have to accept them and move on. Is that what you're doing, moving on? Trying to. Not always successfully. He took a drink from his own coffee. What about you? What made you build an empire before you could legally rent a car? Sienna laughed, surprised by the phrasing. My parents, they're old money. European aristocracy and completely useless. They threw money at problems instead of solving them, married for pedigree instead of love, and raised me to be a beautiful ornament. I hated it, so I proved I could build something they never could. Something real, something earned. And now you're lonely in a penthouse instead of lonely in a chateau. Progress. You're an ass, you know that? I've been told, usually right before someone admits I'm right. She wanted to argue, but he was right. Again. She'd spent years proving herself to parents who didn't care and building an empire that couldn't love her back. So, what's the solution? She asked. If you're so smart. I'm not smart, I'm just observant. And the solution isn't something I can give you. You have to figure that out yourself. That's a cop-out. No, it's the truth. I can show you different perspectives, challenge your assumptions. Be friction, but the polishing, that's on you. They pulled off the highway onto a smaller road, then onto a dirt track that wound through dense forest. Sienna's confusion grew. Carter, seriously. Where are we going? You'll see. 5 more minutes. Those 5 minutes felt like an hour. Finally, the trees opened up, and Sienna saw it. A small cabin overlooking a lake so blue it looked photoshopped. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. This is... She didn't have words. My uncle's place. He lets me use it when I need to think. Carter parked and got out. Come on. The cabin was simple but well maintained. One room with a kitchen area, a wood stove, a bed and a couch that had seen better days. But the windows, floor to ceiling, overlooking the lake, those were spectacular. I come here when the city gets too loud, Carter said, moving to the kitchen and pulling out supplies. Thought you might benefit from the quiet. It's beautiful. It's honest, no pretense, no performance, just a place to be. Sienna walked to the windows, pressing her hand against the glass, the same way she had in her penthouse the night before. But this view, this was different. This wasn't conquest spread out before her. This was peace. What are we doing here? She asked softly. Fishing, talking, being. Depends on what you need. I don't know what I need. Then let's start there. Sit. She sat on the old couch. Carter handed her a fresh cup of coffee and settled into a chair across from her. Tell me about your first deal, he said. Not the Forbes version, the real story. Sienna took a breath. I was 19, had developed an encryption algorithm in my dorm room. It was good, really good, and I knew it. But I was a teenager, a woman, and no one would take me seriously. I pitched 37 venture capital firms. 36 said no. And the 37th almost said no too. But I hacked into his phone during the pitch, showed him every password he'd used in the past month, and proved my algorithm could have prevented it. He wrote a check on the spot. Carter whistled low. That's ballsy. It was desperate. I had $300 to my name and 2 weeks until my scholarship ran out. It was succeed or go back to my parents and admit they were right about me. They thought you'd fail. They thought I was wasting my time, that I should marry well and manage charity galas. My mother literally said, why build when you can simply acquire? Ouch. Yeah, so I built and I kept building. And I never stopped because stopping meant admitting they might have been right. Carter leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Sienna, they weren't right. You know that, right? Building Castellane Industries was incredible. You should be proud. I am. But I'm also exhausted and lonely. And I don't know how to stop building long enough to actually live. That's why we're here, to practice. Practice living. Practice being present. Not thinking 3 moves ahead. Not planning the next acquisition. Just existing. It sounded impossible. Sienna's brain was always moving, always calculating. But something about the cabin, the lake, the way Carter looked at her without expectation, it made her want to try. Okay, she said. How do we start? Carter stood and offered his hand. We go fishing. You ever been? No. Good. Then you'll be terrible at it and I can feel superior for a while. She took his hand and he pulled her up. His grip was strong, calloused, real, different from the soft handshakes of executives and investors. They walked down to a small dock where a rowboat waited. Carter helped her in with the same careful attention he'd shown her engine, making sure she was balanced before pushing off. The lake was perfectly still, the only sound the gentle splash of oars through water. Carter rowed them to the middle, then shipped the oars and reached for 2 fishing rods. "This is a spinning rod," he explained, handing her one. "You're going to cast out. Let the lure sink, then reel it in slowly. The goal is to make it look like a wounded fish." "That's morbid. That's nature. Big fish eat little fish. The trick is making yourself look vulnerable enough to be interesting." Sienna wondered if they were still talking about fishing. Carter demonstrated the cast, a smooth, practiced motion that sent his lure arcing out across the water. Then he handed the rod to Sienna. Her first attempt tangled in the line. Her second went about 3 feet. Her third actually made it into the water, but she reeled too fast and caught nothing. "You're thinking too hard," Carter said. "Feel it. Trust your instincts." "My instincts say this is impossible." "Your instincts are wrong. Try again, sir." She did. And again. And again. By the 10th attempt, something clicked. The motion became natural, the rhythm finding itself. "There," Carter said. "You've got it. Now we wait." "For how long?" "However long it takes. That's the point. You can't rush a fish." They sat in silence, lines in the water, sun warming their faces. Sienna felt her mind start to race, thinking about emails, about the board meeting next week, about the Tokyo investors, and then forced it to stop. "Be present," Carter had said. "Just exist." So she tried, focused on the gentle rock of the boat, the warmth of the sun, the sound of water lapping against wood. The way Carter sat perfectly still, patient in a way she'd never learned to be. "Your dad," she said after a while. "What was he like? Before Vietnam, I mean." Carter was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Happy, or that's what my mum says. I don't really remember that version. The man who came back was different, angry, distant. He'd wake up screaming some nights. Couldn't stand fireworks or loud noises. PTSD. Yeah, but back then they just called it being weak. Told him to man up, move on. He tried. He really did. But some wounds don't heal. They just scar over. Is that why you left the Navy, because you didn't want to end up like him?" "Part of it. I saw guys I respected, good men, strong men, break under the weight of things they'd seen and done, and I realized that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about knowing when to step back before you shatter completely." Sienna's rod twitched. She grabbed it, startled. "You've got something," Carter said, his voice calm. "Don't yank. Just reel, steady and smooth." She reeled, feeling the resistance, the pull of something alive fighting back. Her heart raced. The line went taut, and for a moment she thought she'd lost it. Then Carter's hand covered hers, guiding. "Easy. Let it run a little. Tire it out. You can't force this." Together, they worked the fish closer. Sienna could see it now, silver and flashing in the clear water. Carter reached for a net, scooped and brought up a base, maybe 2 pounds, flopping and gasping. "Your first fish," he said, grinning. "How do you feel?" "Terrible. It's dying. It's alive, and we're going to release it, but first hold it, feel what you caught." He placed the fish in her hands. It was cold, muscular, fighting even now. Sienna felt its heartbeat against her palms, fast and desperate. "This is what real feels like," Carter said softly. "Something alive, something fighting, not a spreadsheet or a stock price. Life." Then he showed her how to remove the hook carefully, how to hold the fish in the water until it was ready, and how to let it go. They watched it disappear into the depths, and Sienna realized she was crying. "Hey," Carter said, concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, everything, I don't know." She wiped her eyes. When's the last time I held something alive? Something that wasn't trying to impress me or use me or sell me something? When did I forget what real felt like?" Carter moved closer in the boat, carefully maintaining balance. "You didn't forget. You just built walls so high you couldn't see over them anymore. I don't know how to tear them down." "You don't have to, not all at once. Just make a window. Let someone see in, let yourself see out." "Is that what we're doing? Making windows?" "Maybe, if you're brave enough." Sienna looked at him, really looked. At the scars on his hands, the lines around his eyes, the way he carried himself like he was always ready for something, but hoping it wouldn't come. He was broken too, she realized, just in different ways. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good. That means it matters." They fished until the sun started to descend, catching and releasing 3 more bass. Then they rowed back, and Carter built a fire in the cabin's wood stove while Sienna explored the small space. She found books, military history, philosophy, some worn paperback thrillers, found photos of Carter and other men in uniform, their faces young and hopeful, found a Purple Heart in a drawer, dusty and forgotten. "You were wounded," she said, holding up the medal. Carter glanced over from the stove. "Shrapnel, Fallujah. Wasn't as bad as it could have been." "You don't display this." "Why would I? It's not an achievement. It's a reminder that I survived when others didn't. That's survivor's guilt talking. That's reality talking. I was good at my job, really good. And my job was ending lives. That's not something to celebrate." Sienna set down the medal carefully. "Do you regret it, the Navy?" "No, it made me who I am. But I regret some of the things I did. Some of the orders I followed. You can't spend 8 years in special operations without compromising yourself in ways that matter. Is that why you're so intent on fixing things now? Atonement." Carter smiled, sad and knowing. "Maybe. Or maybe I just want to build something instead of destroy for once. Create something good." "Like what?" "Haven't figured that out yet. For now, fixing cars is enough. Helping people get where they need to go. It's simple, but it's honest." He finished with the fire and pulled out supplies to make dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and sauce from a jar, but he moved with the same precision he brought to everything. "Can I help?" Sienna asked. "Can you cook?" "I can order from Michelin-starred restaurants." "That's not the same thing. Come here, I'll teach you something useful." He showed her how to boil water, how to tell when pasta was al dente, how to warm sauce without burning it. Basic things that Sienna had never learned because she'd always had money for takeout or private chefs. They ate on the couch, plates balanced on their laps, watching the last light fade from the lake. "This is nice," Sienna said. "Quiet." "Too quiet for you?" "No, just different. My life is always noise, always moving. This is peaceful." "You could have this, you know, if you wanted it." "Have what?" "Peace, quiet, a life that isn't just work and performance." "I wouldn't know how. You start small, take a day off, go somewhere without your phone, let yourself be bored, let yourself be human." Sienna set down her plate. "Why are you doing this? Teaching me fishing, bringing me here, showing me all this?" Carter was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe because you remind me of who I used to be, so focused on the mission that I forgot to live. Maybe because I see someone drowning and I'm programmed to help. Or maybe what? Maybe I'm curious too. Want to see who you are under all that armor. Want to see if there's something real worth knowing. And if there isn't, then we'll have had a nice day fishing, and you'll have learned to make pasta. Either way, no harm done." But it felt like more than that. The way he looked at her felt like more. The way her heart raced when he was close felt like more. "I should probably get back," she said, even though she didn't want to. "Early morning tomorrow. Meetings?" "Always meetings." Carter nodded and started cleaning up. They drove back in comfortable silence, the darkness making the truck feel intimate and safe. When he pulled up to her building, Sienna didn't want to leave. "Thank you," she said, "for today, for showing me. Whatever that was. That was real. And you're welcome." He shifted to look at her. "Sienna, about that dinner I promised. How about Friday? Somewhere actually nice this time, no boats, no fishing. Just 2 people getting to know each other. I'd like that." "Good, I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something that makes you feel beautiful, not something that makes you look successful. There's a difference." She smiled. "I'm learning that." Inside her penthouse, Sienna stood at the window and watched his taillights disappear into the city. Her phone showed 47 missed calls, 93 emails, 12 texts from her assistant asking if she was alive. She ignored all of them and went to bed, her hands still smelling faintly of lake water and fish. For the first time in years, she slept deeply and dreamed of nothing at all. When she woke the next morning, everything felt different. The sunlight streaming through her windows looked softer. The city sounds seemed distant rather than intrusive. Even her reflection in the bathroom mirror appeared changed somehow, less polished, more human. Sienna made coffee in her expensive machine and realized she preferred Carter's French press brew. She checked her phone and saw the accumulated chaos of her absence. Urgent messages from her CFO, concerned texts from board members, a voicemail from her head of legal wondering if she'd been in an accident. She responded to none of them. Instead, she sat at her dining table, the one that seated 12 but had never hosted a dinner party, and thought about friction, about diamonds being polished, about walls with windows. Carter had shown her something in that cabin by the lake. Not just peace or quiet, though those had been revelatory enough. He'd shown her what it meant to be present, to do something without calculating its ROI or strategic value, to simply be human for a few hours without the constant performance of success. And it had terrified her. Because if she could be happy in a cabin with no Wi-Fi, eating jar pasta and catching fish she'd never keep, what did that say about the empire she'd built? About the penthouse and the cars and the board meetings and the Forbes covers? What did it say about the life she'd convinced herself she wanted? Her phone rang. Carter. She answered before the second ring. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "You survived the night?" "Barely. My assistant thinks I've been kidnapped. My CFO is threatening to call the police, and I have 17 urgent emails about a crisis that apparently only I can solve. And I don't care, not today. Maybe not ever again in quite the same way." She heard his smile through the phone. "That's friction working. Uncomfortable, isn't it? Terrifying. I'm second-guessing everything I've built. Good. That means you're thinking instead of just executing. That's growth, Sienna. It's supposed to hurt a little. It hurts a lot. Then you're doing it right. Listen, about Friday. Yes, I didn't ask anything yet. I don't care. Whatever you're planning, yes. I trust you." Silence. Then, quietly, "That might be the bravest thing you've ever said. Or the stupidest. Sometimes they're the same thing." He paused. "I have to go. Got a Mustang coming in with transmission issues. But Sienna." "Yeah? Don't let them pull you back in today. The empire won't collapse if you take another day to breathe. I promise." "How do you know?" "Because if it could, you built it wrong. Real things don't crumble from a day of absence, only illusions do." He hung up, leaving her staring at her phone with a truth she didn't want to acknowledge. What if her empire was an illusion? What if all the success and wealth and power she'd accumulated was just another wall, higher and thicker than the ones she'd been trying to escape from her parents? What if Carter was right, and she'd spent 5 years building a prettier prison? The thought should have devastated her. Instead, it felt like freedom, because if it was a prison, she held the keys. She could choose differently, could build something new, could be someone new, or at least she could try. Sienna looked around her penthouse one more time, at the art and the furniture and the view that cost millions, but felt like Nuth Friday arrived like a promise and a threat wrapped together. Sienna woke at dawn, her stomach tight with nerves she hadn't felt since her first investor pitch. She'd spent the week deliberately away from her office, ignoring the mounting chaos, and the freedom had been intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. But today was different. Today she had to show up as herself, whatever that meant. She stood in her closet for an hour, trying on and discarding a dozen dresses. Too formal, too casual, too much like she was trying. Finally, she settled on something simple, a deep blue dress that reminded her of the lake, comfortable heels, minimal jewelry. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone she barely recognized. Not the CEO, not the Forbes cover, just a woman nervous about a date hoping to be seen. At exactly 7 p.m. her doorman called. "Miss Castellane, Mr. Marino is here." "Send him up, Marcus." The knock came moments later. Sienna took a breath, smoothed her dress, and opened the door. Carter stood in the hallway, wearing dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, his hair styled but still slightly rebellious. In his hands he held wildflowers again, a different mix this time, purples and yellows that looked like he'd picked them from a meadow. "You look beautiful," he said, and the simplicity of it made her chest ache. "You clean up well too." He smiled, but there was something in his eyes, a nervousness that matched her own. "These are for you." "So I know it's becoming a pattern. I like patterns, when they're good ones." She took the flowers, their stems still slightly damp. "Come in. I'll put these in water." Carter stepped into her penthouse, and she watched him take it in. The view, the art, the space that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. She waited for judgment, for commentary, but he just nodded. "It's exactly what I expected," he said. "Is that good or bad?" "Neither. It's honest. This is who you are right now. Beautiful, but empty. Impressive, but lonely." He looked at her directly. "The question is whether it's who you want to be." Before she could answer, he offered his arm. "Ready? Where are we going?" "Somewhere I should have taken you from the start. Somewhere that matters." They drove in his truck, the familiar smell of coffee and gun oil, the comfortable silence they'd developed over the past week. But tonight felt different, charged, like something was about to shift permanently. Carter pulled up to a small restaurant she'd never noticed. No valet, no famous chef, just a weathered sign that said Maria's, and warm light spilling from windows. "This is the place you mentioned," Sienna said, recognizing it. "The Italian restaurant. This is where I come when I need to remember what good feels like. And I want to share that with you." Inside, Maria greeted them like Carter was family, her face lighting up when she saw him. She led them to a corner booth, the candle already lit, and brought wine without asking. "You eat, you talk, you figure things out," Maria said, squeezing Sienna's hand. "Sometimes the heart needs food and time in equal measure." When she left, Carter poured the wine and looked at Sienna with an intensity that made her pulse race. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you respond." Fear spiked through her. "Okay. That day in the coffee shop. I told you I was there looking for you, that was true, but I didn't tell you why." He took a breath. 6 months ago I lost someone. My team leader from the Navy, the one who taught me about friction and diamonds. He was killed in action during a mission that went wrong. The loss hit me hard. Sienna reached across the table, but Carter shook his head gently. "Let me finish. Before he died, he told me something. He said that if anything ever happened to him, I should find someone who reminded me why life was worth living. Someone who was fighting their own battles but needed to learn what he'd tried to teach me. That strength isn't about never breaking. So you found me. I found your Forbes article, read about this brilliant young woman who'd built an empire, but looked desperately alone in every photo. And I thought maybe we could remind each other what being human felt like, maybe help each other heal." Tears blurred Sienna's vision. "You were using me, for closure." "I was," he admitted, "at first. But then you insulted me in French, and I got angry, and insulted you back. And when your car broke down at my garage, I saw a chance to apologize, to start over. But somewhere between teaching you to fish and watching you hold that base like it was precious, everything changed." "Changed how?" "I stopped trying to save you and started falling for you. The real you. The one who's scared and lonely and brave enough to admit it. The one who wore coveralls and learned to make pasta and cried over a fish because she'd forgotten what real felt like." Sienna wiped her eyes, her heart hammering. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I can't build something real on a foundation of half-truths. Because you deserve to know that this started as something else, but became something more. And because I'm terrified that when you hear this, you'll walk away. But I'd rather lose you honestly than keep you with lies." The restaurant hummed around them. Conversation, laughter, the clatter of plates. Maria brought pasta, the carbonara Carter had promised, and retreated with a knowing look. Sienna stared at her plate, her mind racing. He'd sought her out, used her, but he'd also challenged her, taught her, shown her what life could be beyond board meetings and corporate armor. "Say something," Carter said quietly, "please." She looked up at him, at the eyes that had seen too much, at the scars on his hands from violence and repair, at the man who'd been broken and was trying to build something good. "I should be angry," she said. "You should. I should walk out and never see you again. You should. But I'm not going to, because you know what? I was using you too." His eyes widened. "What?" "I was using you as an excuse to escape, to question everything I'd built, to have someone else tell me what I already knew, that I was lonely and scared and hiding behind success. You gave me permission to be human again, and I needed that. So yeah, maybe we both started this for the wrong reasons." She reached across the table and took his hand. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what friction does. Grinds away the lies until only the truth remains. And the truth is, Carter Marino, I'm falling for you too. The real you. The one who's angry and grieving and trying to fix things because he spent too long in places where things got broken." Carter's grip tightened on her hand. "So what do we do now?" "We start over. Again. But this time no half-truths. No using each other for closure or escape. Just two broken people trying to build something real. I can do that, if you can. I can try. That's all either of us can do." They ate Maria's pasta and drank her cousin's wine and talked until the restaurant began to close. Talked about fears and hopes and the futures they'd imagined versus the ones they actually wanted. Talked about what it meant to be brave enough to be vulnerable. When they finally left, the city felt different, softer, like the hard edges had been polished away by honesty. Carter drove her home, and when he parked outside her building, neither of them moved to leave. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes, and the day after, and the day after that, until we figure out what this is. And if we can't figure it out, then we'll have tried. And trying is better than hiding." He leaned across the truck and kissed her, soft and careful and full of promise. Sienna kissed him back, tasting wine and hope, and the possibility of something real. When they finally pulled apart, she was crying again. "Why are you crying?" Carter asked, wiping her tears with his thumb. "Because I forgot what this felt like. Being seen, being wanted for who I am instead of what I've built, being brave enough to let someone in. You're the bravest person I know, Sienna Castellane. Building an empire is impressive, but tearing down your walls, that's courage. She laughed through her tears. We're a mess, aren't we? We're a work in progress. There's a difference. Sienna got out of the truck and walked to her building, turning back once to wave. Carter waved back, and she could see him smiling in the streetlight. Inside her penthouse, she put the wildflowers in water next to the ones from before. They looked beautiful together, proof that good patterns were worth repeating. Her phone buzzed, a text from Carter. Thank you for being brave enough to try. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we build something real. Sienna smiled and typed back, tomorrow and every day after. Good night, Carter. She turned off the lights and stood at her window one last time, looking at the city that had witnessed her rise. But tonight, she wasn't looking at conquest or empire or success. She was looking at possibility, at a future built on honesty instead of armor, at love that demanded friction and vulnerability and the courage to be seen. And for the first time in 5 years, Sienna Castellane felt like she was exactly where she belonged, not at the top of her mountain of money, but standing at the beginning of something real, with someone who saw her completely and chose her anyway. The friction had done its work. The diamond was beginning to shine, and somewhere in the city below, another broken soul was learning the same lesson, that the bravest thing anyone can do is let someone see them completely, scars and all, and trust that they'll stay anyway. It was a lesson worth learning, no matter how long it took.